Well, good morning. Good early morning. This is Esoteric Astrology Adventure, number 140. And we are on page 565. We have been discussing a very interesting subject, how, in a practical sense, people can use the energies of the signs of the zodiac at times when they are most available to them. It seems from what the Tibetan says that they are most available to people when the period of the year comes about, which is on the same cross as their sun sign. For instance, if you were born with the sun in Cancer, then during those periods when the sun is in Libra, Capricorn, and Aries, you have a special access to energies that are on the same cross. But we were also discussing a more universal use of these energies, and to do that, the Tibetan went into the life of Jesus the Christ. He begins by saying that this is the life of Jesus, and it is indeed, but it's also combined with the Christ energy and his presence. As we discussed, there is a way in which Jesus is entirely himself as an initiate of the third degree before the fourth. There is Jesus as overshadowed by the Christ, and yet the energy is coming through the presence of Jesus. And then, since he is a high initiate, he can vacate his body and give it over to the Christ, who then is the sole actor within the vehicle, with, I suppose, Jesus standing by and seeing what is done. So when we talk about Jesus, it's one thing. When we talk about the Christ, it's another. When we talk about Jesus the Christ, it becomes very interesting, and there is a cooperation indicated. And so far we've reviewed the ways in which Jesus the Christ was an example of, or used the energies of Gemini, fulfilling the relationship between the divine and the material, and Virgo, blending life and form, or as it says elsewhere, soul and form, or Sagittarius, in which he displays unalterably directed energy, and Pisces, another blending, as it is called, the blending energies of Pisces, and here he demonstrates what the Tibetan calls his sensitivity to immediate and unbroken contact with the Father in heaven. And we said, well, this has to be the Christ aspect, particularly because that is the monad, and the Christ was applying for the sixth degree, passing through the sixth degree, when this immediate and unbroken contact with the monad would be possible. And in this case, it is Sanat Kumara, as in a way the monad and Sanat Kumara are one. So, going ahead then, all the three crosses are shown as functioning simultaneously in his life, and that's the key. The simultaneous functioning, not only of all signs on a cross, but of all three crosses in his case, simultaneously. He is a complete master, the head of the hierarchy, and the crosses, we remember, give the opportunity for synthesis and simultaneous functioning. And we had a little bit of an exercise, well, a tiny little meditation, where we tried to imagine all the signs, let us say on the Mutable Cross or on the Cardinal Cross, on any cross, functioning simultaneously as we envision them all. But it was on the Mutable Cross that we tried, because he had told us something about the energies there, and he had epitomized them in a certain way so we could work with them. Let's see if we can get back to that place. Seems a long way back with so much commentary in between, but here it is, the presentation of duality, the blending of life and form, the presentation of focused energy, and the blended radiance of the final consummation here, where in a way the Sun and Venus are one in Pisces, with Venus being the exalted planet and the Sun giving us this all-inclusive shambolic radiance with which Pisces can be so connected. So he says, well, such a being as the Christ would be blending all the three crosses simultaneously. Functioning simultaneously in his life, a thing hitherto unknown in the perfection which he displayed. Apparently, there have been those who have been able to blend the energies of the crosses, and maybe more than one, but it was this perfection of the blending of the energies of the crosses which was unique. We see here, that the life of the Christ is associated so much with the cross, and this is both a loved and hated symbol. I suppose it's hated by those who love the attachment to what the cross, especially the Mutable Cross, represents, and loved by those for the opportunity shown to disengage from the cross and be free. A perfection of perfect responsiveness and perfect demonstration of result as well. A great ideal is held out here, and we can see that indeed the Tibetan is a friend of the Christ. He says he numbers himself among the humblest of the friends of the Christ. And yet, of course, that is the technical term, having something to do with being on the wisdom aspect and serving the Christ. So giving us a manifestation and an example of the fusion of the 12 energies in one divine personality, expressing individuality on the physical plane. And, when you look at that word individuality, one has to remember we have here indivisibleness, in a sense. That which cannot be divided, and the expression of the unified and unifying consciousness. I'll put that down. The expression of the unifying and unified consciousness. So 12 in some ways is the number of perfection, especially when related to the Deva kingdom, and it does seem that Christ was so close to the Deva kingdom. In our solar system ruled by the second ray, there are said to be 140 billion Deva units and only 60 billion human units, and I assume that these are the conscious, self-conscious ones. That's a whole problem in itself, due to the distribution necessary of Devas and humans across the different planetary schemes. But it is a feminine kingdom, and it's an astral-Buddhic kingdom, and we realize that the Christ, for all the power of his first-ray mind, was in many ways the astral-Buddhic being. At least he trained people in a certain mode, which will be giving way before long, perhaps to a more mental training, maybe in the age of Capricorn. But here is this perfect demonstration and perfect result. It just gives one pause, doesn't it? And the Tibetan appreciates it. You know, so many of the people who think that the Alice Bailey books are somehow against the Christ, or against Jesus for that matter, they should only realize the reverence in which he is held by the author. Profound reverence. Let me briefly complete the demonstration of this truth, the truth that in the initiate of the higher degrees, all the 12 zodiacal energies can focus simultaneously and produce a complete exhibition of divinity as it is intended eventually to express itself through humanity on this planet. So, in a way, the initiate is the forerunner of this type of threefold simultaneous expression. I have given you the expression of the Mutable Cross, and we will take the other two in connection with the Christ and with the cosmic Christ. Note, interestingly, I mean, the Tibetan is so subtle. So much is going on behind the choice of words. But note that Jesus is not here mentioned. Jesus the Christ was mentioned earlier, or at least Jesus alone. And then I looked up another reference which had to do with Jesus the Christ. Here it is, I think. Let me check for sure. Yes, here it is, Jesus the Christ. Someday the gold and the silver threads of the gospel story will be disentangled, and men will know the two interpretations which can be put upon the events and the episodes in the career of Jesus the Christ. The Christ is Jesus. As I say, a threefold kind of presentation. Jesus alone, Jesus overshadowed by the Christ, and the Christ alone in the body of Jesus. I guess all we can do is say that the advice in the New Testament, coming in the red letters, the statements of Jesus the Christ, are superb and a great guide for all of our living. So often it seems as if the Christ himself is speaking. And I've always wondered when the money changers were thrown out of the temple, whether it was a sort of sixth-ray, first-ray Jesus operating, or whether it was the Christ, or some combination of the two. Okay, so it's the Christ and the cosmic Christ which are now being discussed, and we remember that the individual Christ was portrayed through Virgo and the cosmic Christ through Aries, the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So here is the presentation of the fixed cross. We have Taurus. It's good to get up early and do these things early, but the voice sometimes doesn't respond with consistency. Yet one must find every spare moment in which to do this somehow. Taurus. Christ said, as have all the sons of God who know the true significance of the fixed cross, I am the light of the world. And he added, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. DK discusses this idea of the unification of energies through the single eye. The Christ embodied in himself many factors, including the light. With the second ray presentation, it is certainly the ray of love, but it is also the ray of light-carrying or light-bearing influence. And the Buddha, too, of course, he was the light of the world. But all the great sons of God have known that they are the light. Form is light, really. I am the form in which all forms are merged. And of course I am the substance of the form, which is light. It's kind of a Kabbalistic idea, but really shared in all the ancient wisdom religions. Taurus is, as you have heard, so I have heard, the mother of illumination. It has that feminine side to it, being an earth sign. And the eye of the bull is the symbol to the eye to which the Christ made reference. And we have to determine about this eye of the bull, is it astronomically Aldebaran, astronomically, astronomically, Aldebaran. It has many secondary meanings. The third eye, the eye of Shiva, as it manifests, I suppose, in lesser beings than the great logos of Aldebaran. Maybe it functions that way within the Lord of the constellation Taurus. It must be a great source of light, just the way the single eye of the initiate is a great source of light and revelation, and it makes it possible for him to realize that behind all the diversity of form, he is that which unifies all forms in the light from which the form derived. So he could see immediately all that was, and this implies as well a unifying here, unifying intuition which reveals with immediacy the truth. Then of Leo, this is the sign of self-conscious identity, sensitivity to that which lies at first within the personal ring-pass knot, and then later wider and wider sensitivity. And this is testified to by the Christ in the words he spoke to his disciples, "What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul?" It's not just about the soul having bad experiences in hell. It's about the diminishment of consciousness right here in this world. The man remains attached to form and in the grip of vice. One is Taurus, one is Scorpio. So it's about treasures in heaven, isn't it? One could accumulate all manner of power over that which the third aspect of divinity has created, and yet lose one's own sense of being an immortal being with an immortal consciousness which is detached from all contents of consciousness. What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul? My old teacher used to tell me about someone who had badly abused people and came to a realization of it, and I suppose as a result of that realization felt that his life was worthless. He committed suicide, but the book that was open before him was the Bible, and it was on that page. It was pointed to, what shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul? Or his own center of self-consciousness. That significant point of attainment which must precede all the more inclusive states of consciousness. We can lose our center. We can become so distracted in the lower Aquarian sense that desire in form really is the ruler. And we can fail to know ourselves. And did he use the word distracted? No, I guess I did. Excuse me. So eventually we are to relinquish that point, but of course we have to have it first, and we have to know that we are the observer, we are the consciousness, distinct in a sense at first from any object that we perceive. Later there may be a regathering of all perceived objects as of the same essence, but at first that sort of fifth-ray, first-ray distinction between the subject and the object has to be established, and we have to know ourselves as the subject. Notice how the Tibetan, even with two European incarnations, and probably pretty ancient, maybe one of them occurring after the time of the Christ, and almost certainly one of them before, quotes the Bible constantly. I don't think that's just the effect of Alice Bailey, though I'm sure that the contents of her mind in that respect would be useful. Scorpio. The significance of this sign in the life of the Christ has been deleted from the New Testament, but has been preserved for us in the ancient Christian legend that, in the cradle itself, Christ killed or strangled 2 serpents, thus referring to the pairs of opposites which could no longer control him. He had made his way. This is a very, it's a Herculean legend, isn't it? Because it was said of the hero and teacher Hercules that he had done the same, was it not? But the Christ knew the way between the pairs of opposites. And he could use them both, because he could, he was the being, he knew himself to be the being, and could use each of the usual pairs of opposites. He was the consciousness, he was the form, he was the spirit using both. He was not struggling with the temptations, certainly after, well, very large temptations which he overcame, but not with the customary pulls between the soul and the personality, between the good self and the bad self. So there is this statement in the books about forgetting the good self and the bad self and letting only Christ be known and seen. In Aquarius, the expression of this influence has been beautifully given to us in the story of the Last Supper. By the way, this question of deleted, it probably was there. You know, Blavatsky talks so much about the kind of forgeries and insertions and deletions which have occurred in relation to the important scriptures of the world. So it can be said that much of what we have as scriptures today may have been modified by those who were actually rather ignorant of the original teaching of the teacher, at least knew it what was intended to be imparted in a far lesser sense. And so we have often presented to us in the scriptures of various religions, we have distortions there, and even untruths. I don't know who people are that they think they should delete and hide, because that's basically what it is, what is found in the more authentic writings, but such is the egotism of the human being. So the expression of this influence has been beautifully given to us in the story of the Last Supper. Christ sent his disciples into the city to find a man, the man, bearing a pitcher of water upon his shoulder. And you might say, well, okay, what psychic ability here? Christ as the exemplary second ray is the true psychic. We see this in Destiny of the Nations. The first ray, the true occultist; the second ray, the true psychic. This is the symbol of the sign Aquarius, the sign in which the universality of the water of life will become a factor in human consciousness. The universality of the sustaining energy of life, and the fact that all are animated by this energy, and all in fact are this energy. Then we shall indeed all sit down eventually to the communion of wine and bread. he referred indirectly to the same idea when he spoke of himself as the water of life, the great sustaining, nourishing energy, assuaging the thirst of humanity, this thirst to enter the fifth kingdom of nature and to be relieved of the tyranny of the third aspect of divinity, which has so long ruled us. So we tend not to realize that we are all sustained by the same great energy or presence, and that in fact we are that being. But in the coming age of universality, more and more human beings will realize this to be the case. So anyway, on the lowest, well, or an understandable level, this is about sharing. The sharing of that which sustains, which ultimately is the life principle. And in the Esoteric Healing book, it talks about the ancient law of evil sharing and the new law of ancient dominating good. And humanity shares disease under the ancient law of evil sharing. It's a kind of negative Aquarian sharing, but necessary. And we will all share the good and its results, which bring us in line with the divine plan and purpose when the selfishness of egotism is defeated, as inevitably it will be in this sign Aquarius, which tends towards the dissolution of egotism. The sun is in detriment there in Aquarius, which doesn't mean there can't be some egotistical Aquarian people, of course, but the general effect is towards the reduction of egotism and decentralization. Thus, through the use of the energies of these four signs of the fixed cross, Christ demonstrated perfection, the light, the perfect sense of the self, a self of which it could be said, I am that and that I am, or he fulfilled that which Moses was told, the realization of I am that I am. He overcame the pairs of opposites when he was still a child, it seems, when he was still in the early days of initiation, which he recapitulated for us. Actually, the Christ participated in the recapitulation of a number of initiations. The recapitulation of the second, and then on the mountaintop, the transfiguration. It's hard to believe that this was simply the Master or the Initiate Jesus recapturing his own initiation, but it seems the Christ must have participated in that, as the expression was so splendid. He overshadowed the Jesus being crucified, and he enacted a kind of resurrection, which was a great revelation at the fifth. He had taken the fifth initiation, and he himself was struggling internally to complete the sixth initiation, which apparently in the Garden of Gethsemane was fulfilled, did happen. And now to the Cardinal Cross. In the four signs of this cross, we find him also manifesting their energies in their highest form from the angle of human understanding, because we remember that the Cardinal Cross relates to great beings whose life and consciousness is occurring at a level far higher than human understanding can conceive. Though these more by implication than by direct statement, and the Tibetan is in a position where, as a master, he can see the implications. Remember that the Christ himself, and not the Master Jesus yet, the Christ himself was on the Cardinal Cross at that time, because a master truly is on the Cardinal Cross, whereas a fourth degree initiate is only approaching the Cardinal Cross. Aries. So this sign, which is the sign of beginnings, provided the impulse and energy that enabled him to inaugurate the Christian era it initiated through him the age of love, which is only now beginning to take form. As I said, with Aries, the three aspects of divinity do show themselves, the power aspect and will, perhaps the most strenuously, but as the lamb slain from the foundations of the world, the sacrificial lamb, the second ray is there, and in the so-called mildness of the lamb, the receptivity and passivity of the lamb, we have that. And in the great creative activity of Aries, it is connected with the will to creation, we are told later in the book. So it initiated through him the age of love, which in a way was the age of Pisces, through which so much of the second ray comes, but now, which is only now beginning to take form. Well, we're reaching the end of the greater age of Pisces, an age of 25,000 years. We're not told exactly when it ends, but we know we are reaching the end. And its potency is now so great that it has brought about, paradoxically, the world cleavage between those who truly love and those who are still selfish and adhering to a matter form. So there are so many of the ministers of the church who say that after Christ everything was different. He created something new. And some old hymns, in Christ are all things new. The idea of a completely different dispensation where love, and we know soul-egoic love, and even cosmic love, the energy of the cosmic Christ, is being expressed through the Christ, and this, as far as our Earth with its third-ray personality is concerned, is really a new form of expression. So he was aware that he was starting an entirely new stream with respect to a new aspect of divinity, which should characterize the human race, which eventually would express through a second-ray soul and a fourth-ray personality, even if that's not entirely the case yet. With Cancer, the potency of this sign is expressed for us by Christ in the oft misinterpreted words, "Other sheep have I have, which are not of this fold. Them also must I bring." And we know some of the religions have used this to say that they too are the servants of the Christ. I think the Mormonism or the Latter-day Saints, Seventh-day Adventists, they look at themselves as the other sheep. But this, says the Tibetan, refers to the mass consciousness in contradistinction to the initiate consciousness of his disciples. They were all initiates, at least of a certain degree, and probably to a great extent the first degree. Cancer is a mass sign. So he was speaking here of the universality of his caring, even for those of a very low consciousness. And this fold, or this little ashram, consisted of his disciples at first. We are told that that Christ demonstrated in his relationship with his disciples the true functioning of an ashram. And the sheepfolds, the lesser sheepfold of the little bear and the greater sheepfold of the great bear, represent the ashramic structure. So he was saying, I have other sheep who are not of this little ashramic group which I am cultivating here. And of course it also means that he is all-inclusive. Jupiter is exalted here in Cancer. It's all-inclusive. The wholeness is seen as one. And he embraces all of humanity. You know, it's a great mistake to say, well, Christ is only for a small number, a pitifully small number of 144,000, which is really, as the Tibetan explains, a symbolic number relating to the activation of the chakra system. But, it's a bit of a stretch for the average Christian to accept that. The concrete mind of many believers is quite literal, and when you start to enter into the realm of analogy and symbology, they feel that you are diluting the true word and somehow are venturing into falsity and taking away from them their concrete security. Well, we all have to grow up, and it takes a lot of lives. I know we probably wouldn't have liked to see what we were like in the Atlantean days. Then there's Libra, and I think it's a sign or constellation very closely related to the Christ himself as the Prince of Peace, related to the Spirit of Peace, who is the Spirit of equilibrium, we are told. So Christ stood at the point of balance in human evolution, a pivot point, I guess. He stood between the old world and the new, the dispensation of the third-ray personality of the planetary logos and the oncoming second-ray soul. He stood between the East and the West. In the Christian era comes a point of balance, or that crisis of equilibrium in the human kingdom, where decision must be made about the way to be taken. Decision made about the spiritual inclination of mankind, or well, that's the mineral kingdom, that won't do. Spiritual inclination of the human race, or regression to its material preoccupations. And we're still in that choice. Many have made that choice. But humanity, we are told by the Tibetan, is still in the balances, especially the mass of humanity, and the choice is being made on the basis of desire, and not on the basis of clear thought, as is the case with Scorpio, where disciples are focusing their consciousness. So, and of course, he is known as the Prince of Peace, and there will follow, we are told in the scripture, following the great war, following the Armageddon, a period when Satan, the 666, the lower elemental unguided nature, will be bound for 1,000 years, a symbolic period, and peace will reign. Well, let us see what the Aquarian age produces. We do know there will be a period of brotherly love, when Venus, so closely related to the Christ, will be the dominant decanate ruler of Aquarius, and perhaps that era of true peace and creativity and recognition of the soul of humanity will indeed supervene. So much is still, of course, in the hands of humanity. Here is Capricorn, and this sign marks the point of concretion and of crystallization, which results eventually in the death of forms. When things don't move, rigidly cannot move, then there is death. This we see happening today. We're preparing for the shattering of the old world order. In his triumph over death and in his resurrection into life, Christ indicated the deep mystery of Capricorn. And of course, there is the reflected resurrection of the body, in a way, or of a higher type of body, by the Master Jesus. And who was it that engineered that resurrection? Was it the Christ himself who managed to resurrect that vehicle and present it in a new way? And there is a later resurrection where, I suppose, into the sea of fire on the logoic plane, where the Christ is taking his place at the right hand of God, so to speak, and is part of the council chamber of the inmost Shamballa. Well, maybe there are tiers tiers or circles within that council chamber. But anyway, the Christ could enter Shamballa. He was an applying 7th degree initiate and sponsored by the planetary logos himself as Sanat Kumara. So the resurrection here is a still deeper matter, a higher matter. Resurrection into the life energy, the true, the purest energy of life on the cosmic physical plane is going to be found on the logoic plane. But the lesser resurrection is also very important because in the minds of human beings it shows that the body is not the end. And of course it has also led to some illusion in those who feel that the dense physical body must be resurrected in its present form forever, and will be that through which the resurrected human being functions. And of course this is an illusion. One will have no use for that dense physical body. There is a body of fire, there's a resurrected body, there are Maya Virupas, there are different occult structures through which the spirit can function, but as far as the old body in the grave, including all of those who have had their body cremated, there's not much use for it. But this still was an enactment, a demonstration before all of humanity, eventually, at least before all of humanity, which showed that the life of the body had no hold over the rising spirit. And the density, if you look at it, the rocks, and the great boulder was rolled away from the entrance to the cave. So this is the boulder being rolled away from the entrance of cave. The stone rolled away from the entrance of the burial cave shows the overcoming of the lower aspect, of Capricorn. The mineral kingdom, that which holds a man and his consciousness rigidly in the world of matter form, all of that is overcome. And the mountain of the higher initiations is climbed or demonstrated. And Capricorn, you know, we say that it rules 5 major initiations, but if we want to start thinking about what might be major, it is most associated with the 3rd initiation, at least in the mind of occultists. Does it extend until the 7th? So the Christ was also demonstrating the 7th initiation later. We know that the 7th and the 5th, the 6th and the 4th, you know how it goes, the 5th and the 3rd, the 4th and the 2nd, the 3rd and the 1st, they all are related. At each one of the lower initiations of the pairs, one can envision something of the initiation 2 initiations ahead. And so it often is the case, at least on the lower rung of the ladder, that people imagine perhaps when they're taking the 1st initiation that they're taking the 3rd, or when they're taking the 2nd they're taking the 4th. I think by the time one is a 3rd degree initiate, one is not imagining one is taking the 5th as one is taking the 3rd, because by that time one is truly informed of the process of initiation. At least if one is an occultist, I suppose it's possible to take the 3rd or even the 4th initiation and not know the occult doctrine, but certainly one will know the interior life so related to the occult doctrine. So here we have then the summary inaugurating the age of love and embracing all of humanity, other sheep of I which are not of this little ashram, and standing as the pivot point in Libra between the old dispensation and the new dispensation, and making it possible for humanity to take a choice which will lead them into the fifth kingdom of nature and toward the expression of their soul nature and the expression of the soul of the planet, and Capricorn overcoming death. Interestingly enough, and we'll learn this as we get later into the book, the will. Let's see if that conquers death. No. I wanted to see if I had done that. Will that conquers death is directly associated with Capricorn, sure enough. So he seems, at least in the Western world, to be that great teacher who demonstrates the conquest of death. He did this through apparently supernatural means, through the resurrection of the body, but we also have the idea that love, of which he was the greatest exponent among our humanity, love conquers all, including the gates of death. Love creates a relationship with those who are on either side of any great barrier, such as the barrier of the loss of consciousness at death. So love makes it possible for us to exist in two scenes, the scene that is here and the scene beyond. So we have now the idea that the Christ and Jesus the Christ utilized all 12 signs in a masterful manner to demonstrate the climax of human living. And we can see, just as Hercules achieved a kind of triumph in all 12 signs of the zodiac, so did the Christ on the higher turn of the spiral. Just as Hercules achieved the triumph of the soul, mostly, he learned his lessons. He learned lessons and did not always have complete success, as in, interestingly, the two signs of the Christ and cosmic Christ, i.e., through Scorpio, through Virgo and Aries. He seemed to fail more in those two signs, but he learned his lessons, and he achieved a triumph of the soul. Christ achieved a 12-fold triumph in the signs of the zodiac. Yeah. In the signs of the zodiac. So Hercules triumphed in the soul. He achieved triumph of the soul. He learned lessons in, let's say, in all 12 signs, 12 labors of Hercules. Christ achieved a 12-fold triumph, TWELVE, in all signs of the zodiac. And we have been given the Tibetans' interpretation of the nature of that triumph. It was the, if we really think about it, it was the triumph of the head of the hierarchy at that time. Hercules was not an initiate of that status. He was the triumphant disciple. So Hercules, the triumphant disciple, and Christ, the triumphant initiate, in all cases. Okay. A study of these few suggestions anent the life of Christ, and he's not again mentioning Jesus, though he did at the very beginning, encouraging us to look at the kinds of episodes which could involve the life of Jesus, will bring to light the livingness of the whole subject of the crosses, how indispensable they are, how much we need their combined energies simultaneously expressed to fulfill the life of the human being as it enters the fifth kingdom of nature, still a human being, but in the fifth kingdom of nature. We can say that Christ demonstrated what it was to be fully human, to be a member of the kingdom of souls, and even to be, at a certain point in his later development, a planetary life. Although, naturally, since that was beyond the ken of those who were witnessing the unfoldment at that time, and beyond our ken, too, so much less is said about it. You know, he rose into heaven and sat at the right hand of the Father, but you see, those symbols interpreted literally will lead to great illusion. It is needless for me to remind you at this point that on the Mount Golgotha, these three crosses are portrayed. And they have their symbolism too. It's amazing how events in ordinary life take on a great even cosmic significance, but certainly a significance in relation to the life of humanity upon this planet. The Mutable Cross, the unrepentant thief, humanity that does not know of the higher of the pairs of opposites. The Fixed Cross, the repentant thief, which is hierarchy and has reversed the wheel and is now coming away from the depths of ignorance and is entering into the field of love and unity and inclusiveness. And the Cardinal Cross, the cross of Christ, he was on the Cardinal Cross at the time, and Shamballa is concerned here. And through his constant conversations with the Father, we see, of course, that he was closely related to Shamballa, and later, when he accepted the will of the Father, it's like becoming a true member of Shamballa. So, humanity unrepentant, not knowing the difference, completely bewildered and caught in the presentation of the senses, or that which the senses present. Hierarchy, knowing the reality of duality, of the higher self and the lower self, and living progressively the life of the higher self. Remember that even probationers and disciples are included within that large blue circle of hierarchy. And then the Cardinal Cross, which, interestingly enough, the cross of the Christ, you might think of him, well, the cross of Jesus was the fixed cross, but the cross of the Christ certainly is the Cardinal Cross, and even then he was upon it, and certainly today. All right, so, wow, that was quite a section, wasn't it? So we have completed the larger discussion of the Mutable Cross, with many references to the other crosses as well. One is learning a lot about synthesis in this section of the book, and about the climax of human living. There must be a way, I'm trying to think of the relationship between the cross and the triangle, and there is a way in which the cross begins to generate triangular-like figures, namely by becoming the pyramid, which has 4 triangles, 4 faces. So this is the rising up of those triangles represents the spiritualization of the lower elemental nature of the fourfold personality. Well, now we're going to begin to look at here the cross of the crucified Christ, and we know that to be the fixed cross, different from the final cross of the risen Christ. For those who read this treatise, well, that's right, those who are on this earlier cross of ignorance, the cross of humanity, they won't be interested in it. The Christ in them is hidden. It's the cross of the hidden Christ. And those who are on the Cardinal Cross will not need it. They probably could obtain the information within it in a different way. But those who are at our stage of consciousness, who are fighting to have the soul be the major factor of expression in our energy system, we need it. So for those who read this treatise, the cross is of prime importance, which is of prime importance, is the fixed cross of the heavens. Aspirants to the mysteries are steadily increasing in numbers at this time, and this involves a reorientation towards the light. Well, what do we call it? We remember one of the names here of the fixed cross, the cross of right direction. Some of the names for the crosses, as given in this section on the crosses, are indispensable to our understanding of the crosses. So this reorientation, this reversal of the wheel, which is occurring in the fifth petal of the egoic lotus when the solar angel begins to attend to the affairs of its shadow man, this right direction is what makes possible the living of the life of the soul. So this involves their reorientation towards the light, their conscious reversal. Notice the word conscious here. Their conscious reversal upon the wheel of the zodiac. They know they are going in another direction now. They have, well, let's call it by an old name. They call it repentance. Turning around and facing the other way. And their comprehension of the objectives of the processes to which they have given themselves upon the fixed cross. So we are all, are we not, serious readers of this book, aspirants to the mysteries? We are reoriented towards the light of the soul and higher lights. We know we're going against the normal trend that involves the energy expenditure of most human beings. And we do increasingly comprehend the objectives of the processes which are engaging us upon the fixed cross. We can interpret that through which we are passing as, not just, I had a tough time, how bad it was for me, but what is the meaning of this in terms of the evolution of the soul. Disciples are apt to think that the fact of their taking their place upon that cross and demonstrating their willingness to be tested and to show unalterable stability is the major factor involved. Well, it is a cross of testing, isn't it? And so from the time the person is really willing to be tested and is consciously accepting these tests, he is transitioning onto the fixed cross. As I talked about that, sort of fluid area between the end of the mutable cross and the beginning of the fixed cross. But this is not the reality, says the Tibetan. It's not all about that willingness to be tested and to show unalterable stability. That is not the major factor. That is part of the story. The emergence of the soul, of course, is what this cross is to produce. So this is by no means so in reality. Each of these crosses makes its presence felt as a fourfold sphere of influence or a potent center of energy through the medium of an invoking sound. So every cross, interestingly, every cross has its invoking sound. which I would think relates to the simultaneous sounding of all four notes of the four arms of the cross. So it's not just a question of how well the personality fares in showing its mettle. It does have to do that, but there's something more occult involved. And notice just the way the cross can be surrounded by the circle, so this cross turning in space can be considered as suggesting the sphere that must enfold it. If he calls the cross a fourfold sphere, or it's known as a fourfold sphere, we have to attend to those words, a fourfold sphere of influence, actually. Right. This sound goes up from each of the crosses and produces a result and a response from some source. This is very interesting. Everybody is an invocation, and the evocation follows. So when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And the readiness is determined by the nature of the invocation. It is this new fact anent the crosses which is of importance and upon which I seek to briefly touch. So when on any cross will the full sound of invocation arise? Certainly it is a climactic arising. It's not going to happen when one is just beginning to have experience on any one of the crosses. And it is this new fact anent the crosses on which I seek to touch. Only when the influence of all four arms of each cross has produced an effect in the subject is a transition in consciousness made from one cross to another. So completion is required. And that's why it's important to think in terms of all the arms, even for us if we do not have all the arms represented. If we're on the fixed cross in consciousness and we have no fixed signs, we can still think of all the arms through the esoteric rulers and how we may draw into our life the influence of that fixed cross and of all the arms that constitute it. Each transition marking a point of crisis both in the individual and in the larger whole, especially I would say in the transition from the Mutable Cross to the Cardinal Cross. That ends up being a planetary event. Every fourth initiation is really a planetary event. Then a process of invocation is instituted, at first unconsciously, in which case it is in the nature of a diffused call, and later consciously when it takes the form of a focused appeal. So we have transition through invocation and focused appeal. All right, I think I've gone far enough now, probably over the edge. Yes, I am over the edge. 1 hour and 3 minutes approximately. So I'll just say that this is the end of Esoteric Astrology Adventure number 140A, and page 569. And beginning of Esoteric Astrology Adventure number 140B, page 569. We're into some very interesting things. They're very practical. The second part of this book is both expansive and very practical at the same time. So we'll see you soon, continuing.